those that are joining us at Facebook, you can put your comments into that section too. I'll put the books into the comment fields of both sections. There's a Q&A function on the webinar that you can ask your questions in there. And I'm not bringing in the Facebook Live questions until after they're done talking. So that'll be about that 30 minutes. Are you guys going to talk about 30 minutes? Is that what you've got planned?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I'll pop back on with that info. So
okay.
With that, I will real quick talk about Warwick's for those of you that are not familiar with Warwick's. If you're joining us from anywhere outside of San Diego, if you're in San Diego, you better know who Warwick's is. We're located in La Jolla, San Diego, California. And during the shutdown, we reopened after the initial shutdown. We reopened back in May. So we've been doing the social distancing and mask protocol for months now. Back in the secondary shutdown that happened, we had to reduce capacity to 25%, and we're still in that mode. So we're monitoring that, but we're keeping you safe. But if there is, if you don't feel like coming into the store, if you're in the San Diego area, we can ship you your book. You can pick it up curbside. But if you'd like to come in and see us, we have lots of other great things besides books. So with that, I'm going to toss it off to, who am I tossing it to, Liz or Lisa?
Me.
Liz,
me.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. It's happy 2021. I was telling these guys, I saw a meme today that 2021 is just 2020 with bangs. And I feel like I'm feeling that right now. But anyway, we're so delighted to be here. For those of you that don't know us, I'm Liz and I'm here with Lisa Steinke. We're best friends of over 30 years. And we've also co-authored 7 novels together. Most recently, this past July, How to Save a Life. It's a heart-pounding love story with a Groundhog Day twist, and that's available at Warwick's, and you can actually get it personalized there as well. But today, we're here to talk with the wonderful Matthew Dix, and Lisa, I'm going to pass it to you to introduce him.
Welcome, Matthew. We're so happy to have you. I'm going to read your, very happy to have you. I'm going to read your bio, so everybody just has a overall sense of who you are. Matthew Dix is a writer and elementary school teacher. His articles have been published in the Hartford Courant, and he has been a featured author at the Books on the Nightstand Retreat. He is also a Moth storyteller and a 2-time Story Slam champion. Dix is the author of the novels Memoirs of an Imaginary Friend, Something Missing, and Unexpectedly Milo. He lives in Newington, Connecticut with his wife and their children. His latest, The Other Mother, published yesterday. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so fascinated that you co-write novels. I honestly could speak for 30 minutes to you about that. I can't imagine it.
Well, when you were talking earlier before we got on about your wife and the podcast and people, like how you get along, I actually was thinking, oh, well, Lisa and I might need to listen to that.
Yeah, I was too.
Like a marriage. I was like, oh, we have a podcast too, and I was like, maybe we need to listen to that and figure out how we can get along. Although we've been getting along pretty good lately.
Yeah, we have. It's because we haven't seen each other in person, but that's
right.
Sorry.
Well, Matthew, you've received a lot of high praise for The Other Mother. Let me tell everyone a little bit about it. Publishers Weekly said, Dix offers a wistful and quietly moving portrait of a teenage boy keeping too many secrets. His big-hearted, generous novel makes a strong case for empathy and for forgiveness, both toward others and toward oneself. And Jodi Picoult had this to say, a novel as creative, brave, and pitch perfect as its narrator, an imaginary friend named Budo, who reminds us that bravery comes in the most unlikely forms. It has been a long time since I read a book that has captured me so completely and has wowed me with its unique vision. You've never read a book like this before, as Budo himself might say, believe me. That is a pretty great quote from a pretty great author.
Yes, it was really wonderful.
Yeah. So tell us in your own words what The Other Mother is about.
Sure. Well, The Other Mother is about a boy named Michael. He's, around 14 or 15. He's getting ready to go into high school. And he wakes up one morning and he goes down into the kitchen and he discovers that his mother is not his mother, that it looks exactly like his mother. And everyone seems to believe that it's his mother, but he is absolutely certain that this is not his mother. He's not quite sure what has happened, and he can't believe that no one else can see it. But he is sort of trapped in this situation where he believes that this woman is no longer the person he thought she was. And the book sort of takes you along that path until you discover, what's really going on with Michael. It's not a science fiction book. It's not Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Right.
Michael is having a problem, but he's got a lot of other problems in his life too. He's dealing with a stepfather that he doesn't really appreciate. He's dealing with some school situations. Essentially, it's a book about, I like to think about it as when we're kids, we look at our parents and we think for a brief period of time that they're perfect people, that they don't make any mistakes and they're supposed to be ideal in every way. And the older we get, we discover sometimes, unfortunately, that they're just human beings, that, oh no, they're flawed. And, you start to realize all the things that they have wrong with them, like everybody else. And this book is sort of the opportunity for Michael to see a mother that he's not really appreciating through fresh eyes. It's the idea of, wouldn't it be nice if we could look at our parents, not through the eyes of a child, but through the eyes of an actual person? And I think a lot of times we would find more empathy and forgiveness for our parents if we were able to separate ourselves from that view. And that's an opportunity Michael unfortunately gets because of what he's going through. And he has to find his way to the end of the book.
Yeah, that's a really amazingly original concept. So I'm really curious, kind of a two-part question. So what inspired the idea for The Other Mother? And then also, because I know you are a school teacher, I'm curious how that played into it as well, or if it did.
Sure. The idea of the book, 10 years ago, I was driving and I was listening to NPR. And I heard a story on something called Capgras syndrome, which is what Michael is suffering from. And it's this real condition that people have where they suddenly wake up one day and a loved one they believe is an identical duplicate. And it often ends in tragedy, because what happens is they end up killing their loved one, thinking that it's not their loved one, but someone who has done something terrible to their loved one. It's really a terrible thing. So I heard that story 10 years ago on NPR driving, and I thought, well, that's a great first half of the story. I knew it's not enough for a book, but it's the first half of a book. It's like if I join that idea with another idea, I felt like I would have a book. It took me 10 years to actually get to it and to figure out what that would be. But that was the initial thought. And then eventually I started thinking about my own mother and the struggles I had with my mother, who's now passed. But as I look back, I'm sort of disappointed in some of the decisions she made. And, for a time I ended up homeless in my life, and, a lot of sort of rotten things happened to me. And I was very upset with my mother for, where I ended up. And as I got older, I started to realize, oh, she was just a person. Like, oh yeah. And so I took those two ideas. Once those two ideas came together, it sort of happened for me. In terms of being a school teacher, I actually tapped in more to my own experiences as a kid for this book. There's a little bit of sort of wisdom of being a teacher and being in the school and understanding how that place functions, but a lot of it is me. There's a character in the book named Erica Newfang. She is the school psychologist who Michael deals with. Erica Newfang is the school psychologist who I work with every day. I actually spent a lot of time with her today. That's actually her name, and it's really just her. It's Erica Newfang operating as a real human being in a fictional story. She's reading the book right now. I'm doing a book launch on Saturday. I'm going to interview her because I didn't really ask her permission to use her in the book. I just went ahead and did it. So that part of it influences the book, certainly, because there's actually a real person. But I've done that many times with my books. I often take a secondary character and I just take a real person and make them my character. But other than that, a lot of it is me. She's reading the book and she says, this sounds like what you would have been like when you were 14. And to a great degree, Michael is a lot of what I would have been like when I was 14.
That's awesome. So I'm curious, because 10 years from idea to book, and I know you've written books in between. So while you were writing these other books, was The Other Mother always in the back of your head? Is there a reason that you waited, or you just couldn't figure out how to put those two pieces together?
I had the two pieces a while ago. I'm blessed with lots of ideas for books. That is the thing I'm really fortunate. So when it comes time to start writing a new book, I've just started a new one. What I do is I take my list of ideas, which are sort of like, I think this is what the book's going to turn out to be, but I'm never really sure. They really go wherever they want to go in a weird way. but I write down what I think the book's going to be. And, I had like 7 or 8 ideas for books. And then I send them to my wife, who sits across the table from me. I email her, and I email my agent, who lives in Washington State. And then the two of them talk, and they decide which book I should write. And I've just discovered that if I just listen to what women tell me to do in my life, everything seems to turn out a lot better than if I listen to myself.
You're a wise man.
Yeah, so I just turned it over to my wife and my agent. Yeah, they figure it out, and they picked the other mother. They said that's the next one you should write. And as long as I have a sense of where the story might go, I'm agreeable.
That's great. I think sometimes it's easier. We just sent several ideas to our agent and was like, I think sometimes when you have all those ideas and you send them, it takes a weight off to have someone that you trust be like, this is the idea. Because you've got, sometimes it's hard to decide. It's like picking, which kid you like best, or, it's very difficult. So I think that's very smart. I want to, and you kind of mentioned it just a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about process. So I Google stalked you before today. Obviously, I don't know if you felt my Google stalking, but I saw you've done several TED Talks, but one that I found really interesting was the homework for life and how it can assist people in becoming storytellers. I want to talk about that because I find it really interesting. And Lisa, I actually want you to hear it because I have a feeling it's something that we maybe could use. And then I want to talk about how it plays into the process of writing your novels.
Sure. So Homework for Life was my attempt to find new stories to tell on stages. I perform all over the world now on stages telling stories and stand-up comedy and one-person shows. And when I started, I had a nice big list. My friends sent me to storytelling about 11 years ago because they said, you've had the worst life of anyone we know, so you probably have lots of good stories, which is really not what turns out to be a good story. You don't have to have a terrible life to have lots of stories to tell. But that's what I thought. And as I began telling stories, my list started to dwindle. And I started to get worried. I didn't want to be one of those people who goes on stage and rolls out the same 6 chestnuts every night. I always wanted something new. So I gave myself this homework assignment first. I'm an elementary school teacher, so it's my natural inclination to assign homework. So I said to myself, at the end of every day, before I go to bed, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to ask myself, what is the most story-worthy moment from this day? Essentially, what is the moment that I would choose if I had to stand on a stage? If you pushed me on a stage and said, you have to tell a story about something that happened today, even if the day was truly filled with nothing, there was nothing story worthy, I would still choose the moment that would be the most story worthy of all the boring moments. And I wrote it down. Now, I don't write the whole story down because those are called journalers. They're special, precious breeds of people. They tend to journal a lot right after a breakup. And then immediately when they find love again, the journal gets back into the drawer until they get broken up with again. Yeah.
That is you.
And that's fine. But what I wanted to do was create a habit. I wanted something that was easily repeatable. I wanted it to be shorter than brushing your teeth at night, something you would never skip if you were committed. And so I use an Excel spreadsheet. It's got 2 columns. It's got a date, and then I stretch that B column across the screen, and that is the only space that I allow to write the story. So I only get like 4 or 5 sentences to capture the moment. And my goal was, at the end of the month, maybe I'll have 1 new story to tell. And what I discovered, and what thousands of people all over the world have now discovered too, is if you commit yourself to this, if you really sit down every night and reflect back on your day, you'll discover your life is filled with stories. That there's constantly moments in your life where people are saying things to you, or you are experiencing things that are causing you to think differently or feel differently or see the world differently. And the problem is we all live our lives as if our lives are meaningless, really. What we do is we go through our life and we experience a moment of meaning, or maybe we don't even notice it because we haven't refined this lens yet, but we experience something, we take note of it if we're lucky, and then we toss it aside and forget it. And all you have to do is like take your age, whatever your age is, let's subtract 12 from it, right? That'll give you a year. Imagine that age of your life. How much can you tell me from that year of your life, right? Most people can't tell you anything. They lose entire years of their lives because they don't take a moment to take note of it. And what happens is we end up getting older and wondering where all the time went. And we talk about how time flies. It doesn't. Time doesn't fly. We just disregard our memories as if they're worthless until they're gone and we have nothing to look back upon. So Homework for Life is the committed act of acknowledging that every day has something worth remembering. And what happens over time is you discover that the days have many things worth remembering. Most of my days have 3 or 4 or 5 items. They're not all items I'm going to take a stage and tell a story, but that short list that I used to have is now 680 something items long, which means I have 680 ideas for stories I have yet to ever craft or tell on a stage. I become a person who will run out of time before he tells all his stories. And that's a great way to be. And those stories are often very informative for my novels. They tend not to be the ideas for the novels, but they tend to be moments within the novels that I'm going to either use exactly how I experience them, or more often than not, I'm going to take a moment that I experience and I'm going to heighten it for the sake of the novel. I'm going to exaggerate it, or I'm going to shift it to a new location. But once you just start recognizing these moments in your life, you have so much content, so much material. I have more material to work with than you could ever imagine because I'm doing it. And I'm not special. I don't have a more interesting life than other people. Truly, thousands of people now do it all over the world. I teach it. You saw the TED Talk on it. Every single day, this is not an exaggeration, every single day I receive at least one email from a person who told me they've committed themselves to Homework for Life and it has changed their life. They see their life as being more complete, more full. They remember things. If you're a parent, I mean, just imagine all the things that you let go of, that you forget. Your child says something brilliant or hilarious or outrageous, and you think, I got to write that down. And then you never do. And then that kid is 21 and you're wondering where the kid's life went, right? And it was there. You just didn't hold on to it. So that's what Homework for Life is. And it'll help you as a writer 100%.
Yeah, I actually saw that. I was looking at your website, so you guys go to his website. You have an actual example up there, and this is really interesting. And I think what you talk about, where you're like, your book ideas don't come from there, but there was things in there where I'm like, this would be a great moment in a scene.
Right.
For a character. And I saw so many in it. And that happens too, like when I'm driving around, or I'll have a moment and then I say I'm going to write it down and I don't. And Lisa and neither of us have very good memories. And so Lisa, I think actually you would really like that. And I was actually thinking about, we're going to be starting a new novel soon. And I'm like, I think this would be very useful. And just kind of keeping your head in the game every day, thinking about writing or thinking about moments.
Yeah, even if you're not a writer, I tell people you should just do it, because if you never plan on speaking or writing a thing, the ability to actually look back and to review your life, like when I'm on a plane and there's no Wi-Fi, I'll go and say, I'm going to go look back on 2016. I'm just going to relive 2016. It's fantastic. And can you imagine the value that it has someday from my family? When I'm gone, my family's going to have this. And,
right.
My grandchildren are going to be able to notice the things, grandpa was thinking, every day of his life. If your grandparents had done that, can you imagine how valuable that would be to you? Like if your house catches on fire, it's the first thing you grab, and yet we don't create any kind of a legacy for our future generation. So this will allow you to do that.
No, I think that's great. Let's change gears a little bit. I want to talk about, we both love the cover of the novel. It's beautiful. One thing that we love doing at Couchsurfing, we love to hear the author's stories about how the cover came to be, because every publisher is different in how much the author has control, and sometimes they get it right the first time, and sometimes it's 20 covers later. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, this one I got very lucky on. They sent me this, it's right here. They sent me this cover right off the bat. And they said, well, what do you think? And I just loved it. I just thought, at last, I saw a cover that I loved at first, like the first thing I saw. I published with St. Martin's, and my first 2 books were published with Doubleday. And, both of the publishers, they gave me very little input in the cover. I remember the first cover I got for my first book, they said, what do you think? And I said, I don't really like it that much. And they said, okay, we were just asking, but this is what we're going with. And then it won like a design award. No, then it won a design award. And I said, oh, I love it now. But the second one, the story, Unexpectedly Milo, my second book, is a road trip. And when they sent it to me, I said, well, the car's on the wrong side of the road because the story takes place in America. And they said, oh, that's a good point. We'll put it on the correct side of the road. So they let me make a few changes. But in general, I tend to not have any control really whatsoever of the covers, or very, very little. They're willing to accept a little bit of input, but not much. For my last book, I actually recorded a podcast series. My last book was 21 Truths About Love, and the paperback is coming out next month for that book. and I created a podcast on it. And one of the things I did was interview my illustrator of the cover. And so I learned all about how that process works. And I learned that they often don't even read the book. You know, they get a summary of what the book is about, and then they create like 500 alternatives, and someone chooses one, and they hope they choose the one that they like the best. So it's a strange process.
That's interesting. I would love to talk to an illustrator. I mean, it's just it's so interesting to see like someone else's take on, even just from a summary. And I had a feeling that I was always curious if they actually read the books. I had a feeling they didn't.
Well, I mean, it's probably hard to read all the books that you're going to have to create.
Yeah.
Covers for,
Yeah.
Right.
Of course. And they're under so much pressure. I think, you know, when that cover process is going on, it's a very you need to have it out at a certain time. I mean, especially like if maybe the first one or two are rejected, they're under a huge time pressure to get that done.
Well, I got lucky. I love it. I think it's great. And, you know,
it's really
it
good.
also appeals to women, I think. And, you know, it's a book about a 14-year-old boy. So like, it's not the kind of book that immediately women are going to think, oh, I want to read a book about a 14-year-old boy. So I'm glad that the cover sort of speaks to women, I think, a little bit more than what I would have imagined the cover to be. I would have been a terrible cover designer. I would have like put a scraggly little kid, you know, sitting in the mud on the cover, and that would not have worked.
Right. That's why we write and they design, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So and we were talking about this a little bit before we went live, but obviously these are extraordinary times. Tell us what it's like to launch a novel in the midst of not only a pandemic, but also all this breaking news every day around us. It's really hard to even slice out just a little bit of PR, or even you almost even feel guilty about when there's all these other things going on in the world. So tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, it's certainly been different. This is my 6th novel and my 7th book. And so traditionally what my family and I would do is, it's always a Tuesday that a book publishes, and I'm always teaching on a Tuesday. And my wife is a kindergarten teacher, so we're both teaching. But as soon as school ends, we grab our kids and then we drive to all of our favorite bookstores, you know, throughout Connecticut. And we grab dinner at one of our favorite places. And typically on a Tuesday, I'll do a small launch party for just friends. And then like that Saturday, I'll do something big, you know, in a theater or, you know, a larger space. And obviously we did none of that. You know, we came home and ate spaghetti and meatballs, and and we put the book on the table and stared at it. We certainly could have gone to bookstores. My wife and I are being exceedingly careful. We are in a classroom full time with our class. So, you know, I spent 7 hours today in a room with 19 people, which feels crazy. And yet it seems to be working. But because we're with those people, those young kids, we make sure the rest of our lives are exceptionally careful in every regard. So we just don't go to places very often. I took my kids to Barnes & Noble the other day because they really wanted to go and get books. And I said, fine. But like, we went through the store as if it was on fire. You know, I said, get your books. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? You know, we did a lot of sidewalk sales for some of our favorite indie stores in Connecticut this summer. They did a lot of like tables out on the lawn. So we made sure we hit every one of those. But, you know, this has been different. So we're going to do a book launch on Saturday, a virtual book launch. And it'll be different. You know, my wife is going to play the ukulele and sing, and the book is dedicated to my son. So I'm going to interview my son, and I'll tell stories about, you know, writing the book. Erica Newfang, the character, is going to be interviewed. We'll find out what it's like to be a human being who's been placed in a book, you know, without being told. So it'll be fun, but it won't be the same. And you're right, that the way the world is operating right now, you know, I just told my friend, well, last Wednesday, the Capitol was stormed. And this Wednesday, the president was impeached for the 2nd time. And next Wednesday, the new president will be inaugurated. So don't make any plans for Wednesdays. Those are bad days to plan anything.
Yeah.
I mean, for real. I mean, it's just crazy.
New meaning to hump day, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. But it's different. But, you know, we're trying to make the best of it. It has been weird that there was not as much of a lead up. You know, 3 months out, I would have been doing lots and lots of things, but it just didn't feel like there was anything to do 3 months out. So it was literally like a month before I even thought, oh, I should probably do a virtual book launch of some sort. I should do something. Right. And it's worked out. It's been coming together wonderfully, and we're making the best of it.
Yeah, that's all we can do, right?
Right.
Is
Yes.
make the best of it.
Yeah. People can read even in the pandemic. That's the beautiful thing, you know?
I know, I
They should
know.
go to their local independent bookstores and buy lots and lots of books. You should plan, like you should just buy a year's worth of books right now, because you really, you don't want to come with your vaccine and, you know, now you don't want the world to be better. And then you show up to your bookstore and you find out that they're no longer there because, you know, because we didn't support them before. So just buy your year's worth of books now, and then go and drink a lot of coffee, or, you know, buy other things in their stores and while you read those books. I always tell people, you don't even have to read my book, just buy it. You know, as long as you buy it.
Yeah.
I mean, the beauty of the book is it's not going anywhere. Once you buy it, it can sit on your shelf for 10 years before you pick it up. And that's fine with me. You know, I have lots of books that I bought that I can't wait to read. And 15 years later, I still can't wait to read them. So just go buy the books and fill your house with your books. That's what I think.
I totally agree. And one note on Warwicks, I know Lisa and I just in the last couple of weeks, Lisa, I don't know if you got yours mailed, but I ordered books from Warwicks and they mailed them to me, media mail. It was super easy. It was inexpensive shipping and, you know, a great way to support Warwicks. And, you know, you can do that from anywhere in the country. And they were very speedy about it. They were like, boom, boom, boom. I got the books.
I thought so too. Even media mail went quick.
I know. I got it in like 3 days in media mail.
I was very excited.
And these are books. It's not like we need them like right now. I mean, there was a time, I keep telling my children, there was a time when we used to wait for things, when you didn't have your TV show available to you in the moment you needed it.
Just had that conversation with my daughter like 3 days ago.
Yeah, with full gratification a little, you know?
Right.
It's not a bad thing to get something in the mail 3 days after you ordered it. That is a lovely thing.
Yes,
and you know, the bookstores, you can call them and actually speak to people who love books, which is a beautiful thing. So you can just call and say, I need something to read. And this is the last book I read that I loved. What should the next one be? And those people in those bookstores, you don't work in a bookstore because like it's a very profitable, I'm going to become ultra wealthy and buy a yacht when I'm done at this place situation. These are people who just love books. So call them and say, what should I read? And they'll tell you what to read.
Right. And I think you make such a great point. Like we need to support these bookstores or any sort of independent business now, or they won't be there later.
Right. Yes.
Now, Julie, I've got a couple more questions, but since 4:30, I wanted to check in and see what's going over on the FB.
Okay, you guys are cracking me up because I'm sitting in the background going, yes, this is exactly what the public service.
You didn't even have to pay us to say that. You just said it.
The marketing for bookstores was like, yes. And the other thing, what I like to tell Matthew people too, I mean, your books are out, but the pre-order thing is a great thing too, because you can pre-order a book and then in like 3 months, something shows up at your doorstep and it's like, oh, I forgot.
That's so exciting. I love that.
Yeah, and if you love an author, that's a nice thing to do because pre-orders can really help an author. It'll increase the number of books that the publisher will initially print, and it gets a lot of attention. So
it really
help
does.
your authors at the same time.
And that's the thing that I always like to say too. It's like, I mean, we love libraries, we love all of that, but there's a thing that I always like to say when I do events. It's like, if you like an author's book, buy that author's book so that they can write another book.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, there's just those things. Yeah, we're good on Facebook. So we got a couple more questions going.
Okay, yeah, I have a couple more, but I didn't know if you had some on Facebook you wanted to ask.
Not yet. I just put a little thing out there.
Okay. So, all right. So you wear a lot of hats, Matthew, and you've mentioned some of them here. This is what I counted in my Google stalking: novelist, comic book writer, teacher, podcaster, performer, consultant, playwright, obviously novelist. Do you have a preference? Is anything like you're like, yes, I'm gonna do this today, or how do you manage all of that?
Well, I don't have a preference. If you know, I sort of like to have my hands in a lot of things. Someone once asked me, a magazine writer who was interviewing me, they said, how do you juggle so many balls at once? And I say, I don't. That sounds crazy. I said, I just have a whole bunch of balls sitting in front of me. And so I just pick one up and I go, all right, I'm a teacher right now. And I hold the teacher ball, you know, from 8:30 till 3:20. And then the teacher ball gets put down, you know, and I come home and maybe I had a column due today. So I came home and I picked up the columnist ball and I wrapped up that column and put it down. And now I have the novelist has to speak to people ball where I have to go talk about my book. And then later on, I'm going to pick up the novelist has to write his novel. So it's just that, it's just the desire to do lots of things. I mean, it all centers, my wife always says, all of the things I do center around words, whether I'm on stage
Right.
speaking words or writing words or helping people craft their own words, through consulting and things like that. It all comes down to communicating, getting good sentences into the world and, getting messages across to people. That's really what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. I would totally agree with that. If what advice would you give others that want to follow in your footsteps, whether it's any of those roles? Probably, getting words out into the world, cannot talk today, and probably more like writing, but like what advice do you give? I know you do consulting too. What advice are you giving people?
Well, if you want to be a writer, or I mean, even a speaker or anything like that, I think the problem people have, I'm actually working on a book on productivity right now to sort of answer that huge question. But one of the tricky things that people have is they just never get started. There's a lot of outlining in the world. And I tend to think that outlining is your excuse not to start. Unless you're writing an Agatha Christie mystery novel, the kind of novel where you have to lay the clues or nothing makes sense at the end. I just tell people, well, just start writing and see what happens. I used to outline and put Post-it notes on a whiteboard. I used to be really good at buying Post-it notes. That was my skill. Nothing ever actually became a book, but I had lots of great Post-it notes. And then one day I was in Boca Raton with my wife's Nana, for a week's stay, and I was bored as hell because she didn't have cable or Wi-Fi, and I didn't know any of this. It was my first trip to go see her, and my first book started because I was bored in Boca. And I didn't have my whiteboard and my Post-it notes. I just had an idea. I just thought, well, what if I had this idea of a burglar who breaks into people's homes, but only takes things that would go unnoticed. My friend lost an earring. She opened up her jewelry box. She saw that one earring was gone, but the other one wasn't. And she said, she was upset. And I said, well, what if someone broke into your house and took one earring, but left the other one behind? That way you would never suspect that you had been burgled. And I thought, well, that'd be an interesting character someday. And in Boca, I said, well, I'll write a short story about a burglar who steals one earring from a woman. And that became my first book. I discovered that I was just spinning my wheels, planning and plotting and outlining and thinking. And so I just write. I say, just start writing something and see what happens. Not everything you're going to write is great, but it's all practice. I started writing when I was 17 years old. My senior year of high school, a teacher saved my life and got me writing. And it's not an exaggeration to say that every single day of my life since I was 17 years old, I have written. And it took me 17 additional years before I published my first book, which is to say I had to practice a lot before I actually got good enough to publish something. And people just sort of think about writing, or they like the idea of having written, but not actually writing. I love the people who tell me I can only write in a Starbucks with a cappuccino on an Amazonian restored, piece of hardwood. And I always remind them that during World War I, there were soldiers in gas masks in the trenches trying to scribble novels into pads of paper. Isn't it lucky that they didn't need a Starbucks? Actually, isn't it lucky for all the authors who came before Starbucks was even invented that they didn't need a Starbucks, or we would not have a book? People just have this image of what writing is, and it should be, I have 10 minutes. I'm going to try to write 8 good sentences. I have 2 hours. I'm going to try to write a chapter. Just write and see what happens. That is what I tell people to do.
Was your first book called Bored in Boca? Because that's a great
I was like, we might just steal that title. I had this whole thing.
Yeah, no, it's called Something Missing.
Yeah. Oh, that covers great with the
that probably fits a little
better. That,
I've got this whole plot in my head now about Bored in Boca.
Bored in Boca, man. That's either it's a sitcom. Something's got to be done with that title.
It's funny, but if I hadn't gotten Bored in Boca, I really kind of feel like I'd still be outlining bad novels. And there was a moment in my life when I realized, or at least I thought, I wasn't going to be able to write fiction. I thought, well, I'll just be a nonfiction writer. I'll write columns. I'll write a blog, I'll do those kinds of things. And I sort of had abandoned fiction really entirely. It wasn't until my friend Shep, who was playing Dungeons and Dragons like at 35. He was going through some midlife crisis, and rather than buying a car, he started playing Dungeons and Dragons again. He said, "We want you to write our adventures." And I said, "I don't want to write a Dungeons and Dragons adventure." And he said, "Well, you're not writing anything else. And you told me someday that you were going to write a novel, and it appears to me like you're doing nothing. And you need a friend in your life who's going to stick you in the gut and twist the knife."
Yeah.
And that's how I got back into fiction. I started writing Dungeons and Dragons adventures for my friend Shep. And a year later, I said, "Listen, I'm going to try novels again." He had like spurned me onto doing it. And he said, "Why don't you do both?" And I said, "No, I don't want to write Dungeons and Dragons adventures." But that led me back into fiction. I got really lucky. But it's just the idea that if I had just sat down and started writing, I went to college to learn how to creative write. And I'm here to tell you that nothing that happened in college helped me when it came to actually writing books. It was a lovely time when we talked about writing, but you leave college and you don't actually know how the publishing world works, or how to engage in the craft, or how to establish a routine. None of those things are taught in the actual college world. So you don't need that either. Just dive in and write.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's funny. I actually used to play Dungeons and Dragons with my brother when I was little.
Oh,
so
yeah, I played when I was a kid. I still have the books in the basement. Yeah. I'm just not interested. Yeah.
Yeah. All the
After 30 some years, I've learned something I didn't know about you. That's really, we're going to have to talk about that later.
It was before you came along.
I kind of like that you didn't know that about her, though. This is good.
Right?
People don't brag about it. It's not a bragging kind of thing.
It's not something that comes out in everyday conversation.
We don't want to like alienate any people out there that like Dungeons and Dragons.
It's very popular now.
It was very, I was thinking if you had written those books, they'd probably be really wildly successful. So it wouldn't have been.
I don't know about that. But I'll tell you, a lot of screenwriters are playing Dungeons and Dragons right now. Yeah, it's become much more popular. Yeah, it's just not for me at the moment.
I could see it making a comeback. Lisa, it was before your time. I met Lisa when I was 14, so I was past my Dungeons and Dragons stage of my life.
Yeah.
So, tell everybody where they can find you. I thought you've got a great website, and there's so many. You can read more about Homework for Life, watch your TED Talk. So tell everybody where to find you on social media, your website, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. It's well, you can find my website at matthewdix.com, just my name. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Matthew Dix, and Facebook at Matthew Dix. I go out and get my name. As soon as a platform appears, I grab my name. So
good.
So all you have to do is look for me, my full name, and you'll find me in any of those places.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
And one last question: what's up next? Do you have your next book done, or what's?
Because I like to have my hands in lots of things. I have a storytelling book that's published called Storyworthy, teaches you how to tell stories. So I have a follow-up to that that's just about done. I have a book on productivity that's actually under contract. It's the book I'm supposed to be working on right now, but I'm working on the storytelling book, which is not under contract. Don't tell the agent that. And I'm working on.
Lips are sealed.
Yeah, don't tell it. Yeah, she'll probably watch it and kill me. And I have a novel, my next novel I'm in the midst of writing, and I have my first YA book that is just about done. That's
just a few things.
Yeah.
Well, my God,
definitely.
how many that you talked about the balls being in front of you? It's like, I don't know that there's enough room on the desk.
No, well, I never have writer's block. I tell people if they have writer's block, they don't have enough projects. Because I never have writer's block, because if my novel's not working for me right now, I just turn to the storytelling book. And if that's not working for me, I'm writing a musical with a friend of mine. So I'll turn and write a scene in the musical. So,
all right.
It's good to have
musical. Really?
Really? And Board and Boca sitcom. And Board and Boca sitcoms coming. That's what you're gonna write next.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a loser now, Lisa.
I do too.
We gotta get our. We gotta
get our act together over here.
You've published novels. I'll tell you, there's a lot of people that want to write a book, and most people don't even get around to writing one. So I'm always impressed. I say if you write a book, even if it's never published, you should have a party, and the banner on the party should say, "I wrote a book and you didn't." And everyone should bring you presents. That's what should happen every time you write a book. So, congratulations on your success as well.
I love it. Julie, do you have any questions over on Facebook?
That's it. No, we are good.
Okay.
And I just want to let everybody know that the conversation will stay on Facebook, so people can go back and see the beginning of it. I've recorded it. It'll show up on Warwick's YouTube channel. So it'll be there too for people to be able to look at as well. So with that,
hey, I'm going to tell people, if you guys want to find Lisa and I online, you can find us at lizandlisa.com. We also have a podcast anywhere you can find podcasts. It's called We Fight, so you don't have to. And we talk about all kinds of things. And Instagram, we're Lisa and Liz. Twitter, we're Liz and Lisa. And Facebook, we're Liz Fenton and Lisa Steinke. Matthew, it's been a pleasure to talk to you today. I feel inspired. I'm like, I gotta go make my.
Where do we start?
I know. Like, my God.
Well, thank you very much. It was an honor to chat with you. I really enjoyed it.
This was great. Okay, I'm going to take us off of Facebook Live. Good night, everybody. So we are out on that. Thank you, Matthew, and we'll see you in San Diego one of these days.
Yeah,
right?
that would be lovely. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So
Thanks,
Facebook
Matthew.
Live, we're get off of that, and we will stop recording.